Just want to do real quick comparison of synaptic versus endocrine communication, talk about a couple of the endocrine things so that we're like 100% clear. Okay? So synaptic communication, important for direct contact, directed action, right? So what we see is direct communication between an axon that travels down and signals whatever the target is. Target, we talked about last semester, was target, which was skeletal muscle. So using a chemical message, acetylcholine, which was a neurotransmitter, which crossed the synaptic cleft, the only way to detect that chemical message was having a receptor. So two important parts of the communication. There was the chemical, which was the message, and there was the receptor, which caused the action on the postsynaptic cell. Acetylcholine as a message was make the muscle contract. Okay? Because the connection between the nerve and the muscle is so specific, the action is limited to that specific area. Right? So if we look, here's that synaptic terminal. So you have acetylcholine, which is released, crosses that cleft, binds to the receptor, and the receptor creates the action for the message. Endocrine system, again, how does the endocrine system communicate? Releases a hormone into the bloodstream. So essentially, what is a hormone? A hormone is a message that something is occurring, right? So in class, we talked about, before this, we actually talked about the endocrine system. We talked about the hormones in the reproductive system. So in females, FSH is a hormone. What message is that? Well, it's the message that it's time for the follicle to start development, right? Now, how does that message get detected? So FSH is only detected by the cells in the female that are the granulosa cells of the follicle. Why? So in the granulosa cells, there's receptors that are sensitive to FSH, right? In that case, it's very limited. But then we talked about estrogen, and estrogen in females being a growth hormone that affects the whole body. So what's the difference? Why can estrogen affect the whole body and FSH only affects granulosa cells? Well, broad effects occur with estrogen because those receptors are everywhere. They're global. So when we talk about hormones, because you have such a broad effect, we want to think of any cell that has receptors as what we would call a target cell, and that whatever the receptor does is the action for the hormone, right? So hormone equals message, receptor function equals action, okay? The other thing that we would say about a target cell is that if a cell has receptors, then that cell is sensitive to that hormone, right? So as the hormone binds to the receptor, that creates that sensitivity. If there's no receptor, we would say that cell is insensitive to that hormone. And all of our cells have different combinations of receptors, so all of the cells are sensitive differentially, right? Then the last important concept that is uber important when we talk about diabetes is up and down regulation, right? So sensitivity is based on number of receptors. But if you have a ton of insulin in your system, your cells basically are getting that message constantly, and in order to tune out that message, those cells downregulate, or they produce less receptors. The effect, though, is that the cells are less sensitive to insulin. And so that's where we see type 2 diabetes being a problem, and that's why we would call it insulin insensitivity, because there's less receptors produced. Kind of the opposite would be what happens if there's not a lot of a hormone present, and that's when we see upregulation. So now you have this very, very quiet message because very low signal, and the way the cells respond is they produce more receptors to become more sensitive to that message. Right? That would be the goal with a type 2 diabetic. How can we help them with their problem of being less sensitive? Well, try to create some situation where they upregulate receptors for insulin so that they can manage blood glucose levels.